realize they were going before Congress and that this was pretty serious. I think it has been on the upward trend, but that may have some amount to do with the fact that they're handling this fairly well, not super well because they didn't handle it the first several times an issue like this arose, but yeah.
So if people don't like the way a business is operating, take their business elsewhere? Is that what I'm hearing?
Exactly.
That's called a free market solution right there. Just saying.
So what is President Trump's opinion on privacy and security?
Well, as of now, they've not really made a whole lot of statements. They've made one in which they were attempting to say that they're going to try and do a better job of regulating exactly what businesses are doing and all that, and trying to make sure that they're using their data correctly and not misusing it in any way, and that they were going to attempt to remove all the Obama-era information, or I guess standards that had been set up. They said that it wasn't that it was bad, it was simply out of date. This is something that's moving at a very high velocity and needs to be changed over time. But I believe that statement was made a couple months ago, but they've not made any true declarations yet as to what they want to do. Okay. A clear definition. Yeah.
So who owns the data that's out there?
Well, that's the thing. A lot of it has, okay, well, first it's brought in, and since Google is one of the largest I guess companies that there is out there, a lot of it is owned by Google, or Facebook, or one of these other super companies. But then they sell it, and it gets sold and sold repeated. It's a little bit of a trickling down of it. It's kind of like, well, an example that my grandpa would probably use is he sells tractors. And so maybe like 30 years ago, 40, 50 years ago, the way that tractors would be sold is that someone would buy a very large, expensive tractor the first year if they had a very large farm to keep up. They had the extra money because they have a large farm, and so they would buy a new tractor every year. The issue is that if you buy a new tractor every year, you run out of money very quickly. So you must resell that tractor the second year. And so there'd be a slightly smaller farmer who made slightly less money, who would then buy that tractor and then use it the next year, and it would trickle down from there. It's kind of like that. The data gets less valuable as it ages, and things along those lines, and so it trickles down. So eventually you have these smaller companies that are capable of buying it because it's cheaper now. And so it spreads out over, I don't know any exact numbers because it's a very broad thing, a lot of it, and a fair amount of it is shady when you get into countries like China and Russia. So there aren't a whole lot of exact numbers, but it's owned by many people. The majority of companies, anybody who buys help from an analytical company, technically owns some amount of that data because they're utilizing it. So it's a very broad and difficult question to actually answer well.
So I don't own my data that I put out.
It's a very broad understanding of ownership. Let's see. I'm trying to think of a good example of explaining that. I suppose it's kind of like the idea that an artist who creates a digital copy of a painting that they've drawn, specifically digital for this example. So the artist may own that piece of art, and they'll sell the rights to it to another company that can sell it. But as long as they retain the right, their own copyright to sell it as well, you can have multiple companies selling the same piece of artwork. It's similar to that, I would say. I think that's a fair analogy for it.
There's also, whenever you get on a website or create a social media account, there's always the terms and conditions or whatever that randomly pops up, and you look at it maybe for a couple of seconds. It's like 20 pages. And you're like,
Actually, you don't read all of that? Every word? You don't? Josiah, do you read it all when it pops up? No. Nate, I know you read it all.
I've heard countless lawyers tell me that they don't read it.
Okay,
So
there you go.
And you just click it because you
Yep.
wouldn't want to use Instagram.
Right.
So.
Is there a concern to you, Ashley, that all your private information is out there being mined by people you don't know?
A little bit, yeah. But I would say also, that comes with, using the internet and having a social media account. Like, yeah, it's unfortunate that my data and my personal information is being sold regardless of, who I am. But that's kind of what happens when I volunteer, I'm going to give a social media account, even though it doesn't, it's not needed for me.
Somebody tell me about Cambridge Analytica.
Yeah, so I actually researched that a little bit.
Okay. I like the smile. She was excited about that. Go on.
Cambridge Analytica is, kind of a data collection agency, pretty much. And
So perfect conversation for what we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, as you know, with the Facebook scandal recently, they've been accused of collecting information, and Facebook has come out and said that they did know that Cambridge Analytica was doing that and notified them to stop. But
Okay, let me hold you right there. Okay, so Cambridge was getting data. How does Facebook play into what Cambridge Analytica
it
was
was
doing?
getting data from Facebook.
It was getting data from Facebook
Yeah.
on its users. Okay, how was it doing that?
Well, a lot of it was done through quizzes that people would take.
Okay.
So on Facebook, I don't know, I'm assuming at least most of you have Facebook, but there's kind of these little quizzes that'll like pop up in your feed occasionally.
Is that a generational thing? I can't have Snapchat. I have to have Facebook because I'm old. Is that a guess? Okay.
Maybe.
I can't Instagram.
If you get Instagram, I will friend you.
Okay,
Or whatever.
I
don't
appreciate
do this
that.
much either.
All right,
It's
we'll
not-
assume that I have
it's
Facebook
not
'cause I do,
exactly my
Nate. Go
cup
on.
of tea either,
Go
so-
on.
No, but quizzes will pop up in your feed often, and what they were doing is they were taking these quizzes, and these quizzes can occasionally get into some very, the word pops into mind is racy, but that's not exactly the right word for it. Very personal stuff. And so they would take the answers from these quizzes, and I'm assuming, I don't actually know whether or not this was inside the terms and services of the quiz or inside the terms and services of Facebook. I'm assuming Facebook, but I'm not sure. But they would take the answers from these quizzes and they would send them off and have them analyzed through different forms of data mining.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so Cambridge Analytica got the answers to quizzes?
To some extent. There was not only that, but there were just general likes and things along those lines that people would do on the regular Facebook feed. But I know that there were specific concerns about these quizzes because they would sometimes lead onto different sites that weren't Facebook exclusively.
Okay.
And so they were, I think some of the argument was that the terms and services don't exactly apply in that case, but I'm not entirely sure.
So you said that Facebook is free to sell that data anyway. So why do we care that Cambridge Analytica in particular had access to data that came from Facebook? Why do we care?
Because they were sort of a third party. You know, when you're putting your information on Facebook, you're not really thinking, you know, this third party is going to come in and get my information because I'm putting it on Facebook. You're just thinking Facebook has it. And Cambridge Analytica, though the number's like unknown, apparently it's been like 87 million people that they've gotten data from. And there's also, you know, if you watch the news, people are guessing that that collection of data helped Donald Trump win his presidency by specifically targeting people on Facebook and advertising his campaign.
That's where I was getting, was why did it matter that they were collecting data? Who cares? The thought is it may have affected the election at some point. Okay, interesting.
What role does LCA have in internet regulation?
He does not want to touch that. Does LCA regulate the internet?
Yeah.
They do.
If you're on LCA server, you know,
See?
you can't get on Snapchat or Instagram. You
Okay.
can get on Pinterest, which is interesting.
Wait, just as a side note, you block Pinterest and see how many teachers knock down your door. I made that mistake once, I will never do that again. Carry on.
Yeah. That's also why, as Josiah said, hotspots,
Yes.
why they're frowned upon because LCA can't monitor, you know, what we're searching for while we're at LCA, which I guess can prove, you know, dangerous to LCA.
So you think it's good that LCA says you can't use a hotspot on our campus?
Be honest.
Be honest.
I don't think it helps because we have data that we can use on our
Absolutely.
So-
Why would LCA, let's talk a little bit, let's dig down just a little bit for everybody's edification. Why is it a bad idea that I let you use a hotspot on our campus?
Because everything that you want is the school Wi-Fi.
Mm-hmm.
That wouldn't be there if we could just use our phones or something.
Okay.
And I think that when we're on this property, we should abide by the rules here.
Absolutely. I have a philosophy that you can't unsee things. And what happens if on Monday Ashley's mom calls me and says, Ashley was able to get to X, Y, and Z inappropriate website while in your school? And I say, no, she can't. I've got it blocked. But Ashley was using a hotspot. Problem?
Yeah, they
For me?
reliable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, are there terms and services? Are there conditions like there are on Facebook for data usage at LCA?
It's that contract
Well,
that we
it's-
sign every year and you don't read it.
Oh, you heard me. Oh, no, you read every, Mr. Matthews, she read every word of that. Absolutely. He's taking notes over there. Okay, so LCA has the right to filter, right, to block if necessary. Okay, that's stated in terms and conditions. We'll call it your student handbook, right? That you sign every year and you read every word of. Okay. Yeah, good. I want to make sure we were good there. Okay, we've talked about the broader topics of government regulation, privacy rights, national security. You try to strike a balance between the right to privacy and these national security concerns that some of this data mining we hope would address. We're never going to strike that balance right. It's never going to be perfect. Would you prefer the balance be struck heavier on the security side or heavier on the privacy side? What's more important to you individually? I want to hear from each of you. Are we going to err on security or are we going to err on privacy? And why?
One thing I would say before that is if you're able of striking heavily on one side and actually leaning it, then you're probably more capable of balancing it than you would think. You're capable of intentionally leaning it one way or another.
Did you just avoid my question, Nate?
Just a little bit.
Okay, let's answer it then.
But no, what I would say is I would err on the side of, honestly, privacy.
Okay.
For the sake of what I've seen in Soviet Russia and in China currently.
Okay, so privacy for you. What do you think, Josiah?
I think probably leaning more towards privacy because that was one example I read about, and it was about a school who put a program on students' laptops that they gave to the students, and it allowed them to monitor those students at any time, even if they took the laptops home. And they saw one kid that was eating like some candy or something in his room, and they mistook it for like, I don't know, like drugs or something.
Okay.
And so they brought up the next, and they returned this to school. It was like Mike and Ike's.
They're like, yeah.
Okay.
But when they got back to school, they confronted him about this.
Okay.
But then they were like, "How in the world do you know that?" And that's when it all got brought up, and they got sued, they got fined, like $50 million.
Okay. So if they had erred on the side of privacy, that might have been avoided.
But I think that if security is too, and if you have too much security, you start mistaking people and like falsely, because that's all you're looking for. And so like that example when you just eat a candy could be.
Okay. Ashley, privacy, security.
Well, before I kind of, pick one or the other, I just want to mention that it's hard to pick one or the other because, if you get, as we mentioned earlier, if you have too much privacy, what's going to, what's protecting you as an individual, you're pretty much living out for yourself,
Okay.
pretty much. So, and you're constantly like looking over your shoulder like, is this person dangerous? Is this person dangerous? Because there are no rules.
Mm-hmm.
But if you lean towards security, you're gonna have a 1984 issue where Big Brother's
Well
constantly
played. You just spoke to her heart right there. Literacy quote.
where Big Brother's constantly looking out for you, and even if you're not doing anything wrong, you can get accused just because the government doesn't like you and they want to stay in control.
Mm-hmm.
Saying that, guess I would, and this is a like 10%,
Yep.
not really committed privacy.
Okay.
But I'm only saying that because, having a government that's controlling everything that you do and preventing you pretty much from living your life is not something
Like
you
China and
want.
Russia.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I guess I would say that.
Nate, did you have?
I was going to say, if I want to know how to build a signal chamber, I feel like I should be allowed to do that.
Okay. Let me take this into a real world example. Are you guys familiar with the terrorist attack in San Bernardino?
Yes.
2 active shooters. Do you remember what happened with the device they found after that incident? They found an iPhone. There was a huge, big privacy versus security around that. Talk to me a little bit about that, and I would like to know your personal feelings, because you've all kind of said privacy, wishy-washy privacy, maybe kind of 10%ish. How do we feel about that? That was a blatant example of the privacy of data, and Apple certainly camped out on that side, versus the security of the nation in this case, potentially.
I think that what Apple was saying was pretty justified because they didn't want to come out and hack into one of their own phones.
Mhm.
Because that's what Apple's always stood for. They stood for like being so secure, and like they said that they weren't even able to break into, like they didn't have the software necessary at the time to break into. And so they had to create a software to break into. And it was like, and I was just like the code that could put in like code after code after code, like for your password.
Mhm.
And they did that, and I think that it would really affect kind of their sales, and because people would view that as buying something that isn't as secure. And there's a really good quote from Apple that I think it says, oh wait, no.
Okay. No, there aren't any good quotes from Apple. Okay, other people thoughts on the San Bernardino? Josiah spoke very well to what happened with the iPhone. Apple said, no, we won't break it, because if we come up with software, then they could use it to break other phones. Talk to me a little bit about that, how you feel,
So,
Ashley.
I remember at the time that it came out, I was thinking, why did Apple not help the government when the government's clearly using this for a good thing? They're not
Right.
just using it to impose on people's rights. They're doing it pretty much to protect people from an incident like this happening again, or trying to figure out, why this happened. But then you also have the side, if Apple's going to put, that into their phones, it's going to be easier, say, for, a group or party that's not the government and that's not looking out for us to break into those phones. And I think also, like, just hypothetical, if the government went, on the edge, and the U.S. government wasn't doing what it was supposed to, and Apple had already, said, yeah, you can do this, you can break into our phones, what's going to prevent the government from doing it again? Because Apple's already said that they can do it.
So you agree with Apple's take on that one? Okay.
One thing that I would say is that at this point, this woman has been known as a criminal. And when you are known as a criminal, there are certain rights that you give up. Just as when someone becomes guilty of a federal crime, they're no longer capable of buying a gun. I think that you might give up certain rights to privacy. It was 14 killed, correct? I think 14.
The number escapes me,
Okay.
okay.
I'm not entirely sure. But that's absurdly serious, and I think that you give up part of your right to privacy whenever you've done something like that. And so I'd say that if Apple were to have decided to give up the information on that phone, then it would have been justified, because they would have given up that, because they were convicted at that point of that crime, from what I understand, or at least painfully obvious of having committed the crime.
So who decides how we define terrorist activity in terms of what we're searching, how we're communicating online? There was even an issue with the Florida shooting. He said he was going to become a famous shooter. At what point how those lines get blurred real fast? Who decides? Is it up to the government to decide what counts as terrorist activity or dangerous activity, or is it up to the user? The platform or whatever, the company.
I'm not entirely sure that, I guess some platforms do skate into that. I think Facebook does have something currently in their messaging system that stuff comes up, and they immediately send it off to either the FBI or CIA, whoever it's relevant to. But I know that currently the way that it functions is that the government largely decides that, and they have to have councils within councils deciding whether or not this is actually right and whether or not they're justified doing these. And it also comes down often to things along the just warrants from a judge, determining whether or not the judge himself. So that's how it currently works. And I'm not going to say it's worked the absolute best, but the average everyday citizen isn't going to really ever have to make that decision unless they're in an occupation that forces them to. So I think it's a good idea for platforms to do that, like Facebook currently is, I believe. But yeah, I think it ends up being both. It's not in individual one. Yeah, it's working with more than one always works better.
And I think to piggyback on that, that's the beauty of having, a democratic republic, as we call it, because we're allowed to elect, who we think is going to better represent our beliefs and what we think, the government should and should not do. And also, like Nate said, we have multiple steps and trials